Hello there. Welcome to today's session. Well, none of us had expected that we will come across with such a huge break in between the academic year. Well, I hope each and every one of you is keeping well. You're really doing good at home. So we actually had one more lesson to finish out of modern literature, modern English literature from module 3. The lesson is titled as How Should One Read a Book by Virginia Woolf. Without much ado, I hope that let me start the session. I hope you have gone through the primary material that I had already provided. Just get, trying to know more about Virginia Woolf. We know that she is one of the champions of modern English literature. After the death of her father in 1904, she and her sister together shifted to a house in Bloomsbury, which later developed as a haven for London's literary circle to discuss art, literature, politics, and later came to be known as the Bloomsbury Group. In 1912, he married Leonard Woolf. He was an author, an editor, and together they found Hogarth Press in 1917. From the death of her mother, it actually happened in her early childhood. She was actually in the verge of mental depression at that stage, and that haunted her later, even after her marriage, even after being a very successful author of the time. She had this fix of insanity within her, and she drowned herself in the river Ouse, near their hometown Sussex in 1941. Moving on to the text as such. So as we all know, the title of the text is How Should One Read a Book? So to put it in a nutshell, what this whole lesson is trying to tell you or convey you is just this. Virginia Woolf is literally trying to give us some ideas or suggestions about reading a text by yourself. She says that she would like to give us an advice about reading, and she says that the best advice that you can give a person who is reading or about reading in relation to reading is to give no advice at all. To follow, you have to follow. If you are a reader, she says that you have to follow your own instincts. You have to follow your own reasoning. Reasoning means your own critical thinking power in order to reach the destined conclusion. She says that how can we literally bring about rules to the books that we read or the habit of reading itself? Don't you think that it is a bit impossible? If you just take into consideration the Battle of Waterloo, she gives it as an example in the text itself. If you consider the Battle of Waterloo, it happened on a particular day. But is Hamlet a better play than King Lear? Can you literally or do you have an answer for that? It depends on your own personal instincts or impression of reading. Am I correct? So no one can literally go and make such a definite evaluations. And so as a matter of fact, she says that you just cannot admit authorities to the libraries that you visit. To admit authority over here means assign some rules and regulations, okay, how a library should run, or what kind of books a library should have, and such like that. She says that you can't assign such rules to library just because it will destroy the spirit of freedom, and because of that we cannot have any laws and conventions. So she goes on to say the next point. So you have to enjoy your freedom inside the library. We all know, what makes a library. You have such an assortment of novels, histories, memoirs, biographies, dictionaries, blue books, books written in all languages by men and women of all temper, races and ages. They jostle each other on the shelf of a library. How are we to bring order to such a kind of a multitudinous chaos? So, get the deepest and widest pleasure from what we read. So, this is a question literally put forward by Virginia Woolf in between, in the very outset itself. So, over here she goes on to the extent of using a kind of a phrase, multitudinous chaos. Chaos again means disorder, confusion. So don't you think like over here library is actually taken as a place. Library is a place which has a variety of works of art, okay, and these are written by many men and women of the world having different temperament. You have different types of literature over there. So all these actually make the world, okay, inside the library chaotic. You shouldn't feel like a library is full of disorder. That's not the sense conveyed over here. Okay, so how can we bring about an order to such a kind of a chaotic situation? So she says that she has a solution for that. She says that simply you can start giving some kind of rules and conventions to such chaos by differentiating different types of literature. For example, we have as a part and parcel of literature, you have fiction, you have poetry, you have histories, biographies, memoirs, etc, etc, etc. So these are different types of literature. So she says that you have to take into consideration each type of literature as unique. It is endowed with its own qualities. Okay, you shouldn't mix it with each other and look or read or try to understand it as a whole. Each and every type of literature, it's unique, it's exclusive. Okay, and apart from that, you keep that view in mind, and then what you have to do is you have to banish all kinds of preconceptions when we read a particular textbook. What do you mean by these preconceptions? She says that most of the people nourish these kinds of preconceptions in our mind. She goes on to say that usually or mostly people have a preconception about a poetry that it shall be false, about a fiction that it will be true or it is true, about biography that it will be flattering, and about history that it shall enforce our own prejudices. Okay, so she says that the best way to bring order to that multitudinous chaotic world inside a library is, of course, first of all, to take into consideration each and every type of literature. Okay, it is something that is unique. You should consider the exclusivity of each and every type of literature. Then apart from that, you have to banish all the aforesaid preconceptions about literature. Then after that, what should you do? After that, you have to be a reader. She says that do not dictate your author. Okay, this should be your mentality. You should prepare your mind like that. You shouldn't dictate your author. Just become him. Just become his fellow worker or accomplice. If you criticize, she says that if you criticize, you won't receive the fullest possible value out of a particular literary work. So you have to open your mind as widely as possible. And she says that reading is a longer and a more complicated process than seeing. She even goes to compare the process of reading a fiction, okay, to that of, what I'm trying to tell you is this. She says that 32 chapters of a novel can be compared to that of a building. A building will be having its own structure, its own architecture, frame, form, etc. No? So like that, a 32 chaptered fiction or a novel, okay, that 32 chapter, it gives form and concreteness to a work of art. And what makes or creates this complexity is the play of words in it. And she says that words are more impalpable than bricks in a building. Impalpable actually means very difficult to understand. Okay, it evades our understanding. Words have such tendencies. Okay, and being students of literature, you better understand that in between. Okay, such an easy reading. If you can't confront a very difficult word that you haven't heard about and you can't relate that word, the meaning of the word to the given situation, we feel literally disappointed. Okay, really unhappy about it. So that's the magic of words. Okay, and that nature of the words, okay, which are inside the fiction. Okay, this is the body of knowledge, basically every work of art. So it creates complexities. And reading, okay, it's longer and more complicated process. She says that there is one way, one quickest way to understand elements of what a novel is doing. The elements of what a novel is doing. How can you do that? To better understand a novel, that's what she is trying to tell us. If you want to better understand a novel, you try writing about any impression that you have received. You just try it. For example, she says that recall then some event that has left a distinct impression on you. I'm reading from page number 52, first paragraph in the middle. How at the corner of the street perhaps you passed two people talking? A tree shook, an electric light danced. Tone of the talk was comic but also tragic. A whole vision, an entire conception seemed contained in that moment. But when you attempt to reconstruct it in words, you will find that it breaks into 1,000 conflicting impressions. Some must be subdued, others emphasized. In the process, you will lose probably all grasp upon the emotion itself. So you were actually trying to recreate the kind of emotion, that experience that you had experienced a moment ago. So if you really want to evaluate the merit of an author, okay, before being very judgmental and critical, most of the people are very much judgmental and critical nowadays. No? So before that, you have to try writing, okay, in the language of your favorite novelist. You try doing it. Only when you try, you will come across, okay, with the kind of merit, okay, how how much hard work the author has literally put on, or how much skilled and talented that person is to convey the emotion exactly through the usage of words. Many a time, words are not enough to describe a particular emotion or a situation, but how skillfully an author has literally combined words to bring about an impression that he remembers or he want to portray or showcase in front of us. Okay, that's one attempt, one thing that you can do to understand any author better. Well, so if you come across with such a kind of a difficulty, imagine that you are not successful enough in conveying one particular event that happened in your life. then what do you want to do? So you have to learn, right, to write, to the quality of the best writers in the world. So what you have to do is, Virginia Woolf is giving us a list of many authors, okay, that are being mentioned in between, but she goes on to mention, emphasis 3 authors: Daniel Defoe, Jane Austen, Thomas Hardy. She says that all these great novelists, they follow distinct features in the presentation of their novels. And the kind of distinct features that these authors maintain in their work, that distinct features make their work unique. And of course, what are these distinct features? For example, if you take into consideration Thomas Hardy, I remember when I was doing degree, when I was pursuing degree, we had Under the Greenwood Tree, a novel written by Thomas Hardy to study for general paper. So in that particular work, so that was my first confrontation with Thomas Hardy, and the first idea that got into my mind from the first hour of study is that Hardy is a writer, okay, of rustic people. Rustic people, that means the peasantry. He actually talks about the life in the villages. I still remember Dick Dewey and Fancy Day, who are the main characters in Under the Greenwood Tree. Well, anyway, so these are the distinct features that are present in the best writers of the world. They have some kind of exclusiveness in the way they deal with their works. The moors, okay, and the stars above our heads, the moors are around us. These are the impressions that we get from Hardy's work. Well, so great novelists are careful to observe the laws of his own perspective. They never ever confuse us. Here she goes on to give us a differentiation. Okay, she goes on to comment about lesser writers. Okay, so she says that greatest writers never ever confuse us, but lesser writers confuse us. They introduce 2 different kinds of reality into the same book. It is told like that. What is meant by these 2 different kind of reality into the same book? She says that if you go and read the works of best writers of the world, as we just discussed earlier, they will be having a kind of logic in their work. They will be the writing will be highly sophisticated. Okay, the twists and turns in it will be logically combined, of course. Okay, such a kind of a structure will be there. But whereas when you come to lesser writers, they confuse us. They literally introduce many kinds of reality into the same book, and often most of these realities literally jostle each other, and they do not go parallel to each other. We have a feeling like why this author has combined or placed this character in such a situation. Or you can again find parallels with many stories that you had already read. Okay, this lesser writers, they might take a subject matter from other persons, or the way of narration from one person. They do it on halfway of their work, and they go on taking some other way of narration from other author. They will try it out in the last section of their work. So they literally go on. So ultimately their work will not have any quality. That's the point. So we are winding up this session right over here, since our text is a bit lengthy. See you soon. Take care. Stay healthy. Stay home.